ever going to find bin Laden?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
You're confident based on?
Because we got a lot of people looking for him, a lot of assets out there, and you can't run forever. Just like the people who allegedly were involved in the East African bombings. A couple of them were brought to justice recently.
Did we ever come close?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
You don't know, or you?
I really don't know. I'm not trying to hide anything.
Tonight I'm going to quote to you from a book entitled Fortunate Son, written by J.H. Hatfield. J.H. Hatfield. When this book was first published, ladies and gentlemen, the copies extant are already out to the public sector, were rounded up somewhat mysteriously. The publisher withdrew their support of the book. The plates used for printing the book were smashed, and the book was, the way they say it in the publishing business, put upon the shelf. I'm going to begin quoting from a chapter entitled Ties That Bind, beginning on page 54, second to the last paragraph. George W.'s early days, or early years, in Midland, Texas, coincided with heady days for West Texas, touched off by the 1973 Arab oil embargo, as the price of crude eventually soared to more than $30 a barrel, and economists predicted it would go even higher. The junior Bush desperately wanted a bigger piece of the action, to strike it rich like his father did years earlier, but without using any of his own money. In June 1977, he formed his own drilling company, Arbusto Energy. Arbusto in Spanish means bush. Like his father, who made his fortune in the oil business with the money of others, George W. founded Arbusto with the financial backing of investors including James R. Bath, B-A-T-H, a Houston businessman whom Bush apparently first met when they were in the same Texas Air National Guard unit. Tax documents and personal financial records in the public sector show that Bath, an aircraft broker with business ties to Saudi Arabia sheiks, had invested $50,000 in Arbusto, granting him a 5% interest in 2 limited partnerships which were controlled by Bush. In one of the most bizarre footnotes to history, Time magazine described Bath in 1991 as a deal broker whose alleged associations run from the Central Intelligence Agency to a major shareholder and director of the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, also known as BCCI, as it was more commonly known. It was closed down in July 1991 amid charges of multi-billion-dollar fraud and worldwide news reports that the institution had been involved in covert intelligence work, drug money laundering, arms brokering, bribery of government officials, and aid to terrorists. And I can tell you that's all true. An accounting commissioned by the Bank of England finally exposed the extent of BCCI's deficits and criminal offenses, forcing the bank's eventual collapse. Bath was never directly implicated in the BCCI scandal. But according to the Outlaw Bank, an award-winning 1993 book by Time correspondents Jonathan Beatty and S.C. Gwynn, Bath originally made his fortune by investing money for Sheikh Khalid bin, that's Sheikh Khalid bin Mahfouz, and another BCCI-connected Saudi, Sheikh bin Laden. Allegedly, and he absolutely is, it's not allegedly at all, the father of none other than Osama bin Laden, the man accused by the U.S. government of masterminding the August 1998 terrorist bombings of the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, which killed more than 250 people, and now the mastermind of the attacks upon the Pentagon and the North and South Towers of the World Trade Center buildings in New York City. According to news reports, in a 1976 trust agreement drawn shortly after Bush's father was appointed director of the Central Intelligence Agency, now listen closely, Saudi Sheikh Salman bin Laden appointed Bath as his business representative in Texas. Bin Laden, along with his brothers, owned Bin Laden Brothers Construction, one of the largest construction companies in the Middle East. In a 1991 deposition, Bath testified he was the sole director of Skyway Aircraft Leasing Limited, a Houston company owned by Khaled bin Mahfouz. Bin Mahfouz had been a major shareholder in the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, which had been accused of using Mideast oil money to seek ties to political leaders in other countries throughout the 1970s and the 1980s. According to court documents that are on public record, Bath also swore that in 1977 he represented 4 prominent and wealthy Saudi Arabians as a trustee and used his name on their investments in the United States. In return, he received a 5% interest in their deals. Once again, folks, listen carefully. Federal authorities, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and the FBI later investigated Bath after allegations were made by one of his American business partners that the Saudis were using Bath and their enormous financial sources to influence United States policy. Time reporters Beatty and Gwynn suggest in their book that the $50,000 Bath invested in George W.'s Arbusto Energy Drilling Company may have belonged to Bath's Saudi clients, since the Houston businessman had no money of his own at the time. The truth is, the only source of his investment money was from the Saudi investors whose names I have already quoted to you. Ironically, the money used to underwrite the first business venture of a possible future president of the United States may have been derived, at least in part, from the family fortune of Saudi terrorist Osama bin Laden. In 1990, in an attempt to distance himself and his presidential father from the growing BCCI scandal, George W. Bush stated in an interview that neither he nor the elder Bush had ever conducted business with James Bath. It was a bold-faced lie. Junior went on record at the time as saying that he met the Houston businessman in 1970 when both were fighter pilots at the Air National Guard base at Ellington Air Force Base. President Bush, quote, knows Bath the way he knows thousands of people, end quote, his son told the press. And the two men could not be considered good friends. Another bold-faced lie. Quote, I've never done business with him, and I know the president hasn't either, end quote. Another bold-faced lie. Because, ladies and gentlemen, a few months later, the release of tax documents and personal financial records into the public sector forced George W. Bush to admit that Bath had indeed been one of Arbusto Energy's original investors. Bush said that to his knowledge, Bath's investment was from personal funds, and no available evidence existed to determine that the money came from Saudi interests, except for the fact that no personal funds of that magnitude could ever be located or ever be found on record to have belonged to Mr. Bath. A lot of questions remain unanswered as to Bass's motives behind his investment in George W.'s first business venture. But in light of the record of George W.'s father, George Herbert Walker Bush, his involvement with the recruiting and training of Osama bin Laden, his friendship with the bin Laden family and many other wealthy and well-placed Saudi Arabians in the Middle East, his deep involvement in the oil industry, both in the United States and in the Middle East, and his involvement with the Central Intelligence Agency has convinced an awful lot of people that that whole financial enterprise, to be able to invest money into George W.'s fledgling business, was not only influenced but probably set up through the influence of his father, George Herbert Walker Bush.
Well, hey, Bill, the good Lord just brought it to my attention. About 2 weeks ago, somebody died who wrote a biography, committed suicide. Is this that guy?
I have no idea. I haven't heard about him.
Oh, well, Bill, check it out. I heard it one day while I was cutting grass, but I said, man, that's very interesting. This guy committed suicide. It's a suicide. Now, I don't know who it was. Somebody wrote a biography.
520-333-4578 is the number, and it's your turn to call. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Bill.
Yeah.
It's Monty from Radio Free Vermont.
Hi, Monty.
Hi there. I was just looking up Mr. Hatfield on the internet, and I noticed it's on the Barnes & Noble website, and...
That means his book is sold by Barnes & Noble.
Right, and it was updated for after the 2001 election cycle. And there's also a note here, an annotation, a statement from the publisher, dated July 23rd of 2001, which clarifies the previous call you had about the suicide.
Uh-huh.
Can I read you a quick paragraph?
If it's about that so-called suicide, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, it says, quote, "We have been reeling from the news since Friday. Jim Hatfield is gone. In a country where not enough reporters and talking heads have the courage to speak truth to power, Hatfield, the president's most controversial biographer, ended his own life in solitude in an Arkansas motel last week."
Let me assure you that I have spoken on many occasions with Mr. Hatfield in previous years because of his research and mine paralleling each other quite a bit. And Mr. Hatfield would not have committed suicide under any circumstances. If he's dead, somebody murdered him.